Martha looked at the small rusted shed at the edge of her property and felt her chest tighten. It was all that remained of her late husband's promises. To the neighbors, it was just scrap metal. To the bank, it was worthless land. But Henry had left a single brass key with a note, "Open when the world seems too dark." With trembling hands, Martha inserted the key. The metal groaned, the door gave way, and in that instant, the smell of oil and memories flooded the air. What was hidden beneath those zinc panels wasn't just metal, it was the answer to all her prayers. Stories like Martha's remind us that real value is found where no one else looks. If you love emotional discoveries and stories about people who refuse to give up when life gets hard, join us by subscribing to this channel so you don't miss any chapters of these extraordinary lives. Hit that like button to help this story reach someone who needs to believe in second chances today. Because what Martha discovered in that forgotten shed will prove that love finds ways to protect us, even after death. Martha Hayes stood in the kitchen of the Iowa farmhouse she'd called home for 42 years, staring at the envelope from First National Bank. She read the words again, though she'd already memorized them. 30 days. 1 month to leave the only home she'd ever shared with Henry, the only place that still held his presence in every creaking floorboard and sun-faded curtain. She was 68 years old, a widow for exactly 1 year and 3 days, and she was about to lose everything. Martha walked to the window and looked out at the 80 acres that had been their life together, the fields where they'd grown corn and raised cattle, the barn where Henry had spent countless hours fixing equipment, the small shed at the property's edge, rusted, sagging, forgotten. The farm had been struggling even before Henry died. 3 bad harvests in a row, cattle prices dropping, equipment breaking down faster than they could afford to fix it. They'd taken loans, remortgaged the property, borrowed against future crops that never came. And then Henry had the heart attack. It happened in his sleep 1 year ago. Martha had woken that morning and reached for him, and he'd been cold. The doctor said it was quick, a massive coronary, no suffering, no warning. At 71, after 42 years of marriage, Henry was simply gone. Martha had been devastated, but she'd tried to keep the farm running. She'd worked 16-hour days, hired help she couldn't afford, sold equipment and cattle just to make loan payments, but it wasn't enough. The debt was $180,000, accumulated over years of struggling and compounded by Henry's medical bills from the decade before his death. The bank had been patient at first, sympathetic even. But sympathy doesn't pay mortgages, and patience has limits. Yesterday, Derek Patterson, the bank's vice president, had visited the farm personally. He was 45, wore an expensive suit that looked ridiculous in the muddy farmyard, and spoke to Martha like she was a confused child. "Mrs. Hayes, I understand this is difficult, but we have to be realistic. The farm isn't generating income. Your debt exceeds the property's value. The kindest thing for everyone is to accept that this chapter is over." "This isn't a chapter," Martha had replied quietly. "This is my life." "I understand," he'd said, though clearly he didn't. "But holding on to something that's drowning you isn't noble. It's just prolonging the inevitable." He'd handed her the final notice and left, his clean shoes tracking mud onto her porch that she'd spent the morning scrubbing. Now standing in her kitchen with that notice in her hands, Martha felt the weight of defeat pressing down on her. She had no children to turn to. She and Henry had never been able to have them, though they'd wanted them desperately. She had no siblings, no close family, just this farm, these memories, and 30 days until both were taken from her. She walked through the house, touching things Henry had touched, the kitchen table he'd built, the bookshelf where he'd kept his automotive magazines. He'd been a mechanic before they'd bought the farm, had always loved cars and engines. In their bedroom, she sat on the edge of the bed they'd shared for 4 decades, and allowed herself to cry. Not the silent tears she'd shed so many times this year, but deep, wrenching sobs that came from the place where grief lived. "I don't know what to do, Henry," she said to the empty room. "I tried to save it. I tried so hard. But I can't do this alone. I need you, and you're not here." The room offered no answers, just silence and the fading afternoon light. Martha wiped her eyes and stood. Crying solved nothing. She needed to be practical. She needed to start packing, to figure out where she'd go, how she'd live on her small social security check. She walked to Henry's dresser. She still thought of it as his, even a year after his death, and opened the top drawer. She'd been avoiding this, knowing it would hurt. Inside were his things, his watch, his wedding ring, photos of them from over the years. She picked up each item, holding it, remembering, and then, at the back of the drawer, her hand touched something unexpected, a small wooden box she'd never seen before. Martha pulled it out. It was simple, handmade, with a small brass latch. She opened it. Inside was a single brass key, old and slightly tarnished, and a folded piece of paper. With trembling fingers, Martha unfolded the note. Henry's handwriting, strong, precise, the same handwriting that had written her love notes when they were dating, that had signed their mortgage papers, that had left her little messages around the house for 42 years. Martha, if you're reading this, I'm gone and I'm so sorry. I'm sorry I left you alone. I'm sorry I couldn't be there to fix this like I always tried to fix everything. But I did fix one thing. Something I've been working on since we were young. Something I kept secret because I wanted it to be perfect. To be my gift to you when you needed it most. The key opens the old shed out back. The one I never let you go in. The one I always said was too dangerous with all my junk in there. I'm sorry I kept you out, but I was protecting my secret. Protecting your future. Open it when the world seems too dark. When you need hope. When you need to know that I'm still taking care of you. Even now. I love you more than any words I ever wrote or said. You were my life, Martha. Every good thing I did was because of you. Forever yours. Henry. Martha read the note 3 times, tears streaming down her face. The shed, the old rusted shed at the edge of the property that Henry had always kept locked, had always told her was full of dangerous equipment and sharp metal, wasn't safe for her to enter. She'd never questioned it. In 42 years of marriage, Henry had never given her reason to doubt him. Now, holding this key and this note, Martha felt something she hadn't felt in months. Hope. Fragile, tentative hope. What was in that shed? What had Henry been working on for all those years? She looked out the window at the structure, small, maybe 15 feet by 20 feet, with rusted corrugated metal walls and a roof that sagged in the middle. It looked like it might collapse at any moment. It looked like nothing. But Henry had left her this key, this note, this mystery. Martha stood, gripping the key so tightly, it left an impression in her palm. Whatever was in that shed, it was time to find out. Martha walked across her property toward the shed as the afternoon sun began to set, casting long shadows across the fields. She'd walked past this structure thousands of times over the years, had occasionally heard sounds coming from inside when Henry was working, metal on metal, the hum of tools, music from his old radio, but she'd never been inside, not once in all their years here. "It's my workshop, sweetheart," he'd say whenever she asked about it. "Got a lot of sharp tools, rusty metal, things I don't want you getting hurt on. Besides, it's a mess. You just make me clean it up." He'd said it with a smile, and she'd laughed and left him to his projects. She'd had the house, the garden, the farm business to manage. He'd had his shed. Now, standing in front of it with the brass key in her hand, Martha wondered what else he'd had. What secret he'd kept so carefully for so long. The shed looked even worse up close. The metal walls were streaked with rust, orange and brown stains running down from every seam and bolt. The door, a sliding panel on a track, was padlocked with a heavy old lock that looked like it hadn't been opened in years. Martha inserted the brass key. It slid in smoothly, as if it had been used recently. That surprised her. How had Henry locked it from the outside if he died in his sleep? Then she realized he must have locked it the day before he died. His last day on Earth, he'd made sure this was secured, made sure whatever was inside would wait for her until she needed it. The lock clicked open. Martha pulled it free from the hasp and set it aside. Then she gripped the handle of the sliding door and pulled. It didn't budge. She pulled harder, bracing her feet. The door groaned, metal scraping against metal, rust flaking away. It moved an inch, then another. The wind picked up suddenly, cold for November, whipping her grey hair around her face. The sky had darkened with clouds. A storm was coming. Martha pulled with all her strength, and suddenly the door broke free from whatever had been holding it, sliding open with a shriek of protesting metal. The interior was dark, completely dark. The windows, she'd seen them from outside, must be covered with something. Martha pulled out her phone and turned on its flashlight. The beam cut through the darkness, illuminating dust particles dancing in the air. And there, in the center of the shed, was a massive shape covered by a heavy canvas tarp. Martha's heart pounded. The shape was large, car-sized, she realized, long and low. The tarp covered it completely, tucked carefully around every edge. She stepped inside. The smell hit her. Not the decay she'd expected, but something else. Oil, metal, leather, polish. the smell of machinery that had been cared for. The interior wasn't the chaotic mess Henry had described. The walls were lined with pegboards holding tools in perfect organization. There was a workbench with more tools, all clean and precisely arranged. Cans of paint and polish sat on shelves. Everything was dusty but orderly. This wasn't just a workshop. This was a sanctuary, a place where Henry had spent countless hours on something that mattered deeply to him. Martha approached the covered shape, her phone's light trembling in her hand. The tarp was tied down with ropes at several points. She found the first knot and began working it loose. Her hands were shaking, from cold, from anticipation, from the grief that hit her in waves as she realized this was Henry's final gift to her. The first rope came free, then the second, then the third. Martha grabbed the edge of the tarp and pulled. The canvas slid away, and in the beam of her phone's light she saw something that took her breath away. A car. Not just any car. The most beautiful car she'd ever seen. Sleek, low to the ground, painted a brilliant blue with 2 white racing stripes running from front to back. Chrome gleamed even under a layer of dust. The curves of the body were perfect, elegant, aggressive. It looked like speed itself made solid. Martha walked slowly around it, her light playing over every surface. The paint was flawless. The chrome was perfect. The tires, wide racing tires, looked brand new. Through the windows she could see leather seats, a wooden steering wheel, gauges that looked like they belonged in a race car. On the workbench nearby she saw a folder. She picked it up and opened it. Inside were documents, lots of them. The first was a bill of sale dated May 15, 1974. She read it by her phone's light. Sold to Henry Hayes 1, 1967, Shelby Cobra, 427 SC chassis, number CSX 3294. Purchase price $8,000. Martha's breath caught. A Shelby Cobra. She didn't know much about cars, but even she'd heard of those. They were legendary, rare, valuable. But why had Henry kept this secret? How had he afforded it? And what was it doing here, hidden in a shed, when they'd been drowning in debt? She kept looking through the documents. More bills of sale, for parts, for paint, for materials. Receipts spanning decades. Photos showing the car in various states of restoration, stripped to bare metal, partially assembled, gradually becoming the masterpiece that sat before her now. And then, at the bottom of the folder, she found something that made her knees weak. An envelope, thick, with her name written on it in Henry's handwriting. With shaking hands, Martha opened it. Inside were 15 letters, each one sealed in its own envelope. Each one labeled with a date. Her next 15 birthdays from age 68 to 83. She opened the first one, the one dated for this year, for the birthday she'd just passed 1 month ago. My dearest Martha, if you're reading this, the world has gotten dark. I'm sorry I'm not there to hold you, to tell you it will be okay, but I can still help. That's what this car is for. I bought this Cobra in 1974, before we were even married. Cost me $8,000, which was almost everything I'd saved. You thought I spent that money on the down payment for our farm, but I lied. The farm down payment came from my parents. The money I saved went to this car. I kept it secret because I was embarrassed. We were struggling even then, and I'd spent our money on a car. But I had a plan. I knew Cobras were special. I knew if I restored it right, if I kept it perfect, it would be worth something someday. It would be our insurance policy, our safety net for when we needed it. I spent 40 years restoring this car. Every spare hour, every spare dollar. I'd tell you I was fixing equipment or working on projects, and I was working on our future. Martha, this car is worth more than you can imagine. Find someone who knows Shelby Cobras. Show them the documentation in the folder. Don't sell it for less than $1 million, I'm serious. Don't let anyone tell you it's worth less. They'll try. Don't believe them. This car is your freedom, your security. The life I always wanted to give you but couldn't because I died too soon. I love you more than anything in this world. You were the best thing that ever happened to me. Every hour I spent on this car, I was thinking of you, making sure you'd be okay when I couldn't be there to take care of you anymore. Open the other letters on your birthdays. I wrote you one for every year I knew I might miss. I wanted you to have my voice, my love, even when I'm gone. You're going to be okay, sweetheart. I made sure of it. Forever and always, your Henry. Martha sank to the floor of the shed, the letter clutched to her chest, and wept. Martha sat on the cold concrete floor of the shed for a long time, crying tears that were equal parts grief, relief, and overwhelming love for a man who'd spent 40 years of secret work to protect her. $1 million. Henry said the car was worth $1 million. That couldn't be right. Could it? She looked at the Cobra sitting perfect and pristine in the dim light. It looked expensive, certainly. It looked like something that belonged in a museum or a collector's showroom. But $1 million? Martha pulled herself together and stood. She needed to know more. She needed to understand what Henry had left her. She went back to the folder on the workbench and began reading more carefully. There was a detailed history of this specific car. Henry had documented everything. The Cobra had been built in 1967, one of only 31 Shelby Cobra 427 SC models ever produced. The SC stood for semi-competition, essentially street-legal race cars. This particular car, CSX 3294, had been owned originally by a man named Jim Thunder Morrison, a regional NASCAR driver in Iowa and Illinois during the 1960s. He'd used it as his personal car between races. There were photos of him with it, newspaper clippings about his racing victories, documentation of every owner from 1967 to 1974 when Henry bought it. Henry had been methodical, obsessive even. He'd kept every receipt, every photo, every document. He'd restored the car not just to good condition, but to absolute authenticity. Original paint colors, original materials, everything done to the exact specifications of how it left Shelby American in 1967. Martha found a notebook, Henry's restoration journal. She flipped through pages and pages of detailed notes written over 40 years. Dates, procedures, problems encountered and solved, sources for rare parts. August 1985. Finally found original spec leather for seats. Cost a fortune, but worth it. Martha thinks I'm buying tractor parts. Feel guilty, but this is for her. December 1992. Finished engine rebuild. 427 cubic inches. 485 horsepower. Started it today for first time in 18 years. Sound made me cry. Hope Martha never hears it running and asks questions. June 2003. Paint job complete. Guardsman blue, white racing stripes. Looks exactly like it did in 1967. Perfect. Martha's going to be secure when I'm gone. That's all that matters. October 2018. I'm 70 now, feeling my age. Saw the doctor about chest pains. Didn't tell Martha. Don't want to worry her, but I'm racing to finish this. Just final details left. Have to make sure it's perfect before... The entry ended there. Martha's vision blurred with tears. He'd known. Maybe not specifically, but he'd known his time was limited, and he'd raced to finish this gift for her. She found a price guide printout from an automotive auction website, dated just 3 months before Henry died. Someone had searched for 1967 Shelby Cobra 427 SC auction results. The results showed recent sales, $1.2 million, $1.4 million, $1.5 million, one car with less documentation than Henry's had sold for $1.3 million. Henry had been right. This car was worth over $1 million. Martha sank onto Henry's workshop stool, overwhelmed. This changed everything. This solved everything. Except, how did she sell $1 million car? Who did she call? How did she make sure she didn't get cheated? And more than that, could she sell it? This wasn't just a car. This was 40 years of Henry's life. 40 years of secret work, of love, of sacrifice. Every bolt and wire represented hours he'd spent thinking of her, working for her future. Martha looked at the Cobra through fresh tears. It was beautiful. Not just aesthetically, though it certainly was that, but beautiful because of what it represented. Henry's love made tangible. His final act of protection. She thought about Derek Patterson from the bank, about his condescending attitude, about the 30-day notice sitting on her kitchen table. She thought about the farm, the land she and Henry had worked together, the life they'd built, and she thought about Henry, lying in bed beside her that last night, already gone by morning, his final thoughts, perhaps of this car, of whether it would be enough to save her. "It's enough, Henry," she whispered to the empty shed. "It's more than enough. Thank you." But first, she needed to figure out what to do next. She needed help from someone who understood these cars, who could guide her through the process of selling it properly. Martha pulled out her phone. No internet connection out here in the shed. She'd have to go back to the house. As she turned to leave, something caught her eye. On the dashboard of the Cobra, visible through the windshield, was another envelope. Martha opened the car door. It swung smoothly on perfectly maintained hinges and reached inside. The envelope had her name on it in Henry's handwriting. She opened it and found a key, the car's key, and another note. "Before you sell it, start it once. Just once. I want you to hear what I heard. The sound of your future starting up. But be careful. This thing is powerful. Don't try to drive it. Just start it and listen. Love. Martha looked at the key in her hand. She looked at the car. Then she looked at the folder of documentation, at the letters from Henry, at everything he'd left her. Tomorrow she'd figure out how to sell it. Tonight she'd honor his request. She got into the car. The seat was positioned perfectly, as if Henry had adjusted it for her. The leather smelled new. The dashboard was beautiful. Original gauges, everything authentic. Martha inserted the key and turned it. The engine erupted to life with a roar that shook the shed. Deep, powerful, unmuffled. The sound of 485 horsepower barely contained. The steering wheel vibrated in her hands. The whole car seemed alive, eager, barely restrained. Martha sat there, her hands on the wheel, tears streaming down her face, and listened to the sound of Henry's 40-year love song. It was the most beautiful sound she'd ever heard. The next morning, Martha sat at her kitchen table with her laptop, an old machine Henry had bought her years ago that she barely knew how to use, and tried to figure out what to do next. She'd spent the night reading and rereading Henry's letter, looking at the documentation, trying to process what this meant. She had a car worth over $1 million, but having it and turning it into actual money were two very different things. She typed "how to sell Shelby Cobra" into Google and was immediately overwhelmed by results. Auction houses, private dealers, collectors, museums, forums full of people discussing prices and authenticity and documentation. One name kept appearing: Sarah Chen, the curator of the Automotive Heritage Museum in Chicago. She was mentioned in several articles as an expert in American muscle cars, particularly Shelby products. Martha found the museum's website and a contact form. She stared at it for a long time, trying to figure out what to say. Finally, she just typed the truth. "My name is Martha Hayes. My husband passed away a year ago and left me a 1967 Shelby Cobra 427 SC, chassis CSX 3294. He restored it over 40 years. I need to sell it but don't know how. Can you help me?" She hit send before she could second-guess herself. While she waited for a response that might never come, Martha went back out to the shed. In the daylight, with the door fully open, she could see the car more clearly. It was even more beautiful than she'd realized. The blue paint had a depth to it that seemed impossible. The white racing stripes were perfectly straight. Every chrome detail gleamed. The side pipes, massive exhaust pipes running along the car's flanks, looked like they belonged on a rocket ship. Martha walked around it slowly, seeing it with new eyes. This wasn't just valuable. This was art. This was history. This was a piece of American automotive heritage that Henry had preserved perfectly. On the workbench, she found more photos, Henry with the car in various stages of restoration. Some of the pictures were old, Polaroids from the 70s and 80s, showing a younger Henry, his hair dark instead of grey, working on a stripped-down chassis. Others were more recent digital photos, showing the completed car, Henry standing beside it with a proud smile. In one photo, Henry was much younger, maybe early 30s. He was standing next to the Cobra, which was completely disassembled, nothing but a frame and some parts. On the back of the photo, he'd written, 1978, Martha's future taking shape. She doesn't know it yet, but I'm building her security. Martha pressed the photo to her chest and closed her eyes. 40 years. 40 years of secret work while she went about her daily life, never knowing that her husband was building her a safety net one piece at a time. Her phone rang, startling her. Unknown number, Chicago area code. Hello? Mrs. Hayes? This is Sarah Chen from the Automotive Heritage Museum in Chicago. I just got your email about the Shelby Cobra. Martha's heart raced. That was fast. CSX 3294 is on my radar, Sarah said, her voice excited. That car has been missing from public records since 1974. The Cobra community has wondered what happened to it. You're saying your husband had it for 40 years? Yes. He restored it. Completely. He left it to me. Mrs. Hayes, I'm going to be very direct with you. If that car is authentic, if the documentation is legitimate, and if the restoration is as complete as you're suggesting, we're talking about one of the most significant Shelby discoveries in decades. Can I see it? You want to come here? To Iowa? I can be there tomorrow, Sarah said. Would that work? Martha looked around the shed, at the car, at Henry's life's work. Yes, tomorrow would be fine. After getting Martha's address and promising to call when she was close, Sarah hung up. Martha stood in the shed, processing what had just happened. Someone was coming to look at the car. Someone who understood what it was. Someone who could help her navigate this. But as she walked back toward the house, she saw something that made her stop cold. Derek Patterson's Mercedes was pulling into her driveway. Derek got out of his car with his usual confident smile, but Martha noticed his eyes immediately went to the shed. The door was still open, and the blue of the Cobra was partially visible from the driveway. "Mrs. Hayes," he called out. "Beautiful morning, isn't it?" Martha walked toward him, positioning herself between him and the shed. "Mr. Patterson, I wasn't expecting you. Just doing a drive-by to check on the property," he said, but his eyes kept drifting toward the shed. "What's that you've got there? That's quite a paint job." "Just an old project of my husband's," Martha said carefully. "Looks like more than a project. That's a Cobra, isn't it? I'd recognize those side pipes anywhere. My father was into classic cars." Derek took a step toward the shed, and Martha moved to block him. "It's not for sale," she said firmly. "Everything's for sale, Mrs. Hayes, especially when you're 30 days from foreclosure." His tone was still friendly, but there was an edge to it now. "Mind if I take a look? I have a friend who collects old cars. Might be interested." "I said it's not for sale." Derek studied her for a moment, and Martha saw calculation in his eyes. "Mrs. Hayes, let's be realistic. A car like that, even in good condition, might be worth $50,000, maybe $75,000 if you're lucky. That's not enough to pay off your debt, but it would help. Let me call my friend. He's fair. He'd give you a good price." Martha felt anger rising in her chest. This man knew nothing about the car, nothing about Henry, nothing about what it represented. And he was already trying to cheat her. "The car is not for sale," she repeated, "and I'd like you to leave now." Derek's friendly facade slipped slightly. "You have 28 days left, Mrs. Hayes. Then this property, including that shed and whatever's in it, becomes bank property. If you want to sell that car while you can still keep the money, I'd suggest you act quickly." He got back in his Mercedes. "I'll have my friend call you. Think about it. $75,000 is nothing to sneeze at." After he drove away, Martha stood in her driveway shaking with anger. $75,000 for a car worth 20 times that. He was trying to take advantage of her, banking on her ignorance and desperation. Well, he'd picked the wrong widow. Martha went back to the shed and carefully closed and locked the door. Then she went into the house and did something she hadn't done in months. She called her neighbor, Janet Morrison. Janet had been their closest neighbor for 20 years, living on the adjacent property. Her daughter, Jessica, had moved to Chicago years ago and worked in something related to cars, though Martha couldn't remember exactly what. "Janet, it's Martha. I need to ask you something. Your daughter, Jessica, what does she do again?" "She's an automotive photographer," Janet said. "Why? Is everything okay? Do you think she knows about classic cars, specifically Shelby Cobras?" There was a pause. "Martha, do you have a Shelby Cobra?" "It's a long story, but yes, and I need help understanding what I have." "Oh, honey, Jessica would absolutely know. Those are her specialty. She photographs them for auction houses and museums all the time. Want me to have her call you?" 20 minutes later, Martha's phone rang. "Mrs. Hayes, this is Jessica Morrison. My mum said you have a Shelby Cobra." "I do. A 1967 427 SC. My husband restored it." Jessica whistled. "Those are serious cars. Have you had it appraised?" "Someone from the Automotive Heritage Museum in Chicago is coming tomorrow. Sarah Chen." "Sarah's excellent. She'll give you a fair assessment. But Mrs. Hayes, I need to warn you about something. When word gets out that you have a Cobra, and it will get out, you're going to get a lot of attention. Some of it won't be good. There are people who make a living buying valuable cars from people who don't know what they have." "Someone already tried," Martha said. "The bank's vice president offered me $75,000 for it today." "For a 427 SC, Jessica's voice was sharp. "That's insulting. If it's authentic and properly restored, you're looking at over $1 million, maybe significantly over. That's what my husband's documentation suggests." "Then you need to be very careful about who you trust. Don't sell it to anyone who comes to you unsolicited. Work only with established auction houses or museums, and document everything. Every conversation, every offer, everything." After they hung up, Martha went to Henry's desk and found a notebook. At the top of the first page, she wrote, "Cobra Sale Log." Underneath, she wrote her first entry, "Derek Patterson, First National Bank, offered $75,000, declined." Then she went back out to the shed. She had Henry's documentation to review more carefully before Sarah Chen arrived tomorrow. In the folder, she found more letters from Henry. Not the birthday letters, those were separate. These were notes he'd written to her during the restoration, explaining what he was doing and why. One letter was dated 1995. Martha, if you're reading this, I'm gone and you're discovering my secret. I want to explain why I kept this from you. We've had tight years. Years where every dollar mattered. Years where I'd come home from working on this car and see you worrying about bills, and I felt like the worst husband in the world for spending money and time on something secret. But I kept going because I knew this was our insurance policy. I knew that someday, maybe when we were old, maybe after I was gone, you'd need this. And I wanted it to be perfect, worth as much as possible, authentic and documented. I spent hours researching values, tracking auction results, making sure I did everything right so that when you sold it, you'd get every dollar it was worth. This wasn't a hobby, sweetheart. This was my job, my real job. Taking care of you even when I couldn't be there to do it in person. Trust your instincts, don't let anyone pressure you. The car is worth what I said in my first letter. Don't take less. Love always. Martha sat on Henry's workshop stool and looked at the Cobra. Tomorrow an expert would tell her definitively what it was worth. Tomorrow she'd start the process of turning Henry's 40-year labor of love into the financial security she desperately needed. But tonight, she just sat with it. Sat with Henry's ghost. Sat with the overwhelming knowledge that her husband had loved her so completely that he'd spent 4 decades of secret work to make sure she'd be okay after he was gone. I love you too, Henry, she whispered, and I promise I won't let anyone cheat me. I'll do this right for both of us. Sarah Chen arrived the next morning in a rental SUV loaded with equipment. She was a compact woman in her early 50s, Asian American, wearing practical clothes and carrying herself with quiet confidence. Mrs. Hayes, she said, extending her hand. Sarah Chen, thank you for letting me come on such short notice. Call me Martha, and thank you for coming. Sarah's eyes went immediately to the shed. Is it in there? Yes. Would you like to see it? Very much. Martha unlocked the shed and rolled the door open. Morning sunlight flooded in, illuminating the Cobra in all its glory. Sarah stopped walking, just stopped completely, her hand coming up to her mouth. Oh my God, she breathed. It's perfect. She approached the car slowly, almost reverently. May I? Of course. Sarah walked around the Cobra, not touching it yet, just looking. She crouched to examine the side pipes, leaned close to inspect the paint, peered through the windows at the interior. Finally, she straightened up and looked at Martha with an expression of awe. Mrs. Hayes, Martha, your husband was an artist. This is one of the finest restorations I've ever seen, and I've seen a lot of Cobras. He worked on it for 40 years, Martha said. I didn't even know it existed until 3 days ago. Sarah shook her head in wonder. 40 years? That makes sense. This level of work, it can't be rushed. She pulled out her phone. May I take photographs for documentation purposes? Yes, and I have extensive documentation from my husband. Would you like to see it? Absolutely. For the next 3 hours, Sarah examined everything. She looked at every inch of the car, took hundreds of photographs, reviewed Henry's folder of documentation, read his restoration journal. This is incredible, she said, flipping through Henry's notes. He documented every source, every part, every decision. The provenance is perfect. The history is complete. And the car itself, she looked at the Cobra with something like love. It's museum quality, concours quality. This should be in the Pebble Beach Concours d'Elegance. It's that good. What's it worth? Martha asked quietly. Sarah met her eyes. I can't give you an official appraisal without my colleagues reviewing everything. But off the record, in a properly run auction, with this documentation, with this provenance, I'd estimate between $1.3 and $1.5 million, possibly more if the right collectors are bidding. Martha's knees went weak. She'd believed Henry's letter, but hearing it confirmed by an expert made it real in a way it hadn't been before. Someone offered me $75,000 for it, she said. Sarah's expression went dark. Who? The bank vice president, Derek Patterson. Did he see the documentation? No, he just saw it from a distance, recognized it as a Cobra. Martha, listen to me carefully. What that man did is called lowballing, and it's predatory. He was counting on you not knowing what you had. If you'd accepted that offer, you'd have lost over $1 million, probably closer to $1.5 million. Martha felt rage building. He knew I was desperate. The bank is foreclosing in 28 days, which gives him leverage to pressure you, Sarah said. This is exactly why people need advocates in these situations. Promise me you won't make any deals without talking to someone who knows the market first. I promise. Sarah pulled out her laptop. Let me show you some recent sales. She pulled up auction results. Cobra after Cobra, selling for enormous sums. One with less documentation than Henry's had sold for $1.4 million. Another, in slightly worse condition, had sold for $1.2 million. The market for these cars is strong and getting stronger, Sarah explained. There were only 31 427 SC Cobras ever made. They're incredibly rare. And one with this level of documentation and restoration quality, this is a major find. How do I sell it? Martha asked. What's the process? You have options. You could sell it at auction, Meekum, Barrett Jackson, RM Sotheby's. They'd take a commission but would handle everything and likely get you the highest price. Or you could sell it privately to a collector or museum. That might be faster but potentially for less money. What would you recommend? Sarah considered. Honestly, given your timeline with the foreclosure, I'd recommend a private sale to a museum or serious collector. It's faster. You could have the deal done in a week or two instead of waiting months for the right auction. And with documentation this good, you'd still get fair market value. Do you know anyone who might be interested? Sarah smiled. Actually, my museum would be very interested. We have an American muscle car wing that would be perfect for this. We also have acquisition funds specifically for significant vehicles like this one. What would you offer? I'd need to present this to our board, but based on what I've seen, I think we could offer $1.3 million. That's a fair market price, and it would go to a place where it would be preserved and appreciated. We'd also create an exhibit about your husband's restoration work. His story deserves to be told. Martha thought about it. $1.3 million, more than enough to pay off the farm, to secure her future, to honor Henry's memory. Could I think about it? She asked. I need to process this. Of course. Take your time. Well, not too much time given your deadline, but a few days at least. Sarah handed Martha a business card. Call me when you're ready to talk. And Martha, don't talk to anyone else about selling this car without getting advice first. There are a lot of people who would love to take advantage of you. After Sarah left, Martha went back into the shed and sat in Henry's workshop stool, looking at the car. $1.3 million. Financial security. The farm saved. Henry's 40-year plan working exactly as he'd intended. But something nagged at her. Before she made any decision, she wanted to read more of Henry's letters. She wanted to understand his full vision for what this car was meant to do. She picked up the envelope containing the letters for her future birthdays. She'd only read the first one. Now she carefully opened the second, the one meant for her 69th birthday. My dearest Martha, if you're reading this, a year has passed since you found the car. I hope you've sold it wisely. I hope you're secure now, but I want to tell you something important. The money from the car isn't just for survival, it's for living. You always wanted to paint, to do art. You'd sketch sometimes when you thought I wasn't looking, and your drawings were beautiful. But we never had the money or the time for you to pursue it seriously. Use some of the money to make your dream real. Take classes, buy supplies, transform that old shed into a studio if you want. Make it beautiful inside even if it looks like junk outside. Turn the place where I spent 40 years working on your future into the place where you spend however many years you have left creating beauty. You deserve happiness, Martha, not just security. Don't just survive, thrive. All my love, Henry. Martha read the letter 3 times, tears streaming down her face. Henry hadn't just given her money. He'd given her permission to dream again, to be more than a widow struggling to survive, to be an artist, a creator, someone who built things of beauty. She looked around the shed. This space where Henry had spent 4 decades working in secret. Could it become her studio, her space to create? The idea took root in her mind and began to grow. 3 days later, Derek Patterson showed up at Martha's door again. This time, he wasn't alone. A man in an expensive suit stood with him, late 60s, grey hair, the confident bearing of someone used to getting what he wanted. Mrs. Hayes, Derek said with his practiced smile, this is Bernard Hutchins. He's the friend I mentioned who collects classic cars. I told him about your Cobra and he's very interested. Martha kept her hand on the doorframe, not inviting them in. I thought I made it clear the car wasn't for sale. Everything's for sale at the right price, Bernard said, his voice smooth. Derek tells me you're in a difficult financial situation. I'm here to help. I don't need help. Mrs. Hayes, may we see the car? I came all the way from Des Moines. Surely you could show me what you have. Against her better judgment, and only because she wanted to see what they'd offer, Martha led them to the shed. When she opened the door, Bernard's reaction was carefully controlled, but she saw his eyes widen slightly. He knew exactly what he was looking at. He walked around the car silently, hands clasped behind his back, face neutral. Then he turned to Martha. It's in decent condition. Needs work, of course. The restoration is amateur at best, but I could use it for parts. I'll give you $150,000 for it. Cash. Today. Martha stared at him. You're joking. That's a generous offer, Mrs. Hayes. More than you'd get from most dealers. This car is worth over $1 million, Martha said flatly. And the restoration is museum quality. You know that. I know you know that. Bernard's pleasant expression didn't change. I don't know where you got that idea, but you've been misinformed. These cars are not as valuable as people think, especially ones restored by amateurs. $150,000 is my final offer. Then my final answer is no. Both of you need to leave my property now. Derek stepped forward. Martha, be reasonable. You have 25 days left before foreclosure. Do you think you can sell this car for more in that time? Bernard is offering you enough to make a significant dent in your debt. You should take it. I said no. Mrs. Hayes, Bernard said, his voice taking on an edge, you're making a mistake. I'm offering you real money right now. Once the bank forecloses, they'll auction this car off for whatever they can get. You'll receive nothing. Take my offer while you still can. Martha had heard enough. Get off my property. Both of you. Now. Derek's pleasant facade finally cracked. You're going to lose everything, Martha. The farm, the car, all of it. And for what? Pride? Stubbornness? We're trying to help you. You're trying to rob me, Martha said coldly. And I'm not going to let you leave. After they drove away, Martha's hands were shaking. She called Sarah Chen. They came here, Martha said without preamble. The banker and a collector. They offered me $150,000 and said the car needed work and was worth nothing. That's criminal, Sarah said, her voice angry. Martha, you need to act now. They're going to try everything to pressure you. Let me call our board for an emergency meeting. Can you give me 48 hours? Yes. Don't talk to anyone else. Don't accept any other offers. Promise me. I promise. That night Martha couldn't sleep. She kept thinking about Derek and Bernard, about their predatory offer, about how close she'd come to losing everything because of ignorance. She got up and went to the shed. By flashlight, she sat in Henry's workshop and read more of his notes. She found an entry from 2017. I think someone's caught on. Dale Pritchard from the feed store asked me what I was working on in here, said he'd seen me buying special paint and materials. I laughed it off, said it was just old farm equipment restoration, but I need to be more careful. Can't have anyone knowing about this until Martha needs it. Sometimes I wonder if I'm crazy, keeping this secret for so long. But then I think about Martha's face when she worries about money, and I know I'm doing the right thing. This car is her freedom. No one can know about it until she's ready to use it. Martha closed the journal and looked at the Cobra. Henry had protected this secret for 40 years. Protecting her. Protecting their future. She wasn't going to let Derek Patterson or Bernard Hutchins or anyone else take that away from her. 2 days later, Sarah Chen called. Martha, our board met this morning. They've approved the acquisition. We're offering $1.3 million for the Cobra. The paperwork is being prepared. We can complete the transaction within 1 week. Martha sat down heavily in her kitchen chair. $1.3 million. It's a fair price. More than fair, actually. And there's something else. Our board was so moved by Henry's story that they want to create a special exhibit. 40 Years of Love, the restoration of CSX 32294. It would tell the story of Henry's dedication, his craftsmanship, his love for you. Would you be okay with that? Tears streamed down Martha's face. Yes. Henry would have loved that. There's one condition, Sarah said. We want you to be part of the exhibit. We want to interview you, record your perspective, include your story alongside Henry's. Would you be willing? Yes, I think I would. Good. I'll email you the paperwork today. Review it with a lawyer if you'd like. In fact, I'd recommend it. Once you're comfortable, we can proceed. After hanging up, Martha sat in her kitchen for a long time, processing what had just happened. $1. $3 million. The farm saved. Her future secured. Henry's legacy preserved and celebrated. She thought about what to do next. The practical side of her mind made a list. 1. Pay off farm debt. $180,000. 2. Farm repairs and improvements. $50,000, 3 lawyer fees, $10,000 for taxes on sale, approximately $200,000, 5. Remaining, approximately $860,000. That was more money than she'd ever imagined having. Enough to live comfortably for the rest of her life. Enough to fulfill Henry's vision of her painting, creating living instead of just surviving. But Martha thought about Henry's letter, about how he'd spent 40 years helping her when he couldn't be there in person, and she thought about how many other widows and widowers were in similar situations, facing foreclosure, drowning in debt, losing the farms and homes they'd worked their whole lives to build. She pulled out a notebook and began planning. 1 week later, Martha stood in her bank, First National, and handed Derek Patterson a cashier's check for $180,000. "This pays off the farm debt in full," she said. "I assume you'll be cancelling the foreclosure proceedings?" Derek's face had gone pale. He knew exactly where that money had come from. "Mrs. Hayes, if you'd sold the car through us, you mean if I'd let you steal it for a fraction of its value?" Martha interrupted. "No, thank you, Mr. Patterson. My business with this bank is concluded." She walked out with her head high, the satisfaction sweeter than she'd imagined. 2 months later, on a cold January morning, Martha stood in her transformed shed with a small group of guests. The exterior looked exactly the same, rusted, sagging, weathered. But inside it had been completely rebuilt. Skylight windows flooded the space with natural light. The walls were insulated and finished with clean white panels. A professional easel stood in the center, surrounded by paints, brushes, canvases. Henry's old workbench was still there, preserved as it had been, with his tools and journals displayed as a memorial. "Welcome," Martha said to the gathered crowd, her neighbors, including Janet Morrison and her daughter Jessica, Sarah Chen, who'd flown in from Chicago, and several local reporters. "I want to tell you about the Henry's Haven Fund." She'd established the charity with $500,000 from the Cobra sale. Its mission was to help rural widows and widowers facing foreclosure or overwhelming debt from farm operations or medical bills. "My husband spent 40 years working in secret to protect me," Martha explained. "He can't protect anyone else anymore, but I can use what he gave me to help others the way he helped me. Henry's Haven has already helped 12 families avoid foreclosure. We've paid off medical debts. We've kept farms in families that have owned them for generations." She gestured around the studio. "This space, where Henry worked to build my future, is now where I work to honor his memory and help others. I paint here, I create here, and I plan here how to use what he gave me to make a difference." Martha picked up a canvas from the easel, a painting she'd been working on. It showed the Cobra, blue and perfect, in this shed with sunlight streaming through the open door. "This is Henry's gift," she said. "It's the first painting I've completed in my new studio. It's going to hang in the Automotive Heritage Museum in Chicago, next to the actual car, as part of the exhibit about my husband's restoration work." After the guests left and the reporters packed up, Martha stood alone in her studio. On the wall was the photo of her and Henry from their wedding day, young and happy and full of dreams. Next to it was one of the last photos taken of him, standing proudly next to the completed Cobra. She'd kept one of his letters, the one meant for her 83rd birthday, 15 years in the future. She'd put it in a frame on the wall, unopened, a reminder that Henry's love would continue reaching forward through time for as long as she lived. On her easel was a new canvas just started. She was painting the farm, their farm, in spring, when the fields were green and full of promise. Martha picked up her brush and began to paint. She had lost her husband. She had faced foreclosure and desperation, and people who tried to take advantage of her grief. But she had survived. More than survived. She had thrived. And she had done it because 40 years ago, a mechanic who loved his wife had looked at a blue sports car and seen not just beauty but a promise that even death couldn't break. Henry had kept his promise. The Cobra had saved her. And now Martha was keeping her promise to him, living fully, creating beauty, helping others, honoring his memory every single day. As she painted, Martha smiled. Outside, the farm stretched under winter sun. Inside, surrounded by Henry's memory and her own emerging art, she was exactly where she was meant to be, not just surviving, living. If Martha's story moved you, please subscribe to this channel and turn on notifications. We share powerful true stories every week about love, resilience, and the incredible things people do for those they care about. Leave a comment below. Have you ever discovered something unexpected that changed your life? Have you witnessed love that reached across time? Share your story. Someone reading might need the encouragement today. Martha and Henry teach us profound truths about love, sacrifice, and value. They teach us that real love plans for the future. Henry spent 40 years working in secret, not because he didn't trust Martha, but because he wanted to give her a perfect gift, a gift that would save her when she needed it most. They teach us that value isn't always visible. That rusted shed looked like garbage to everyone who saw it, but inside was over $1 million worth of automotive art and 40 years of dedication. The most valuable things are often hidden, protected, waiting to be discovered. Most importantly, Martha and Henry teach us that love doesn't end with death. Henry's love for Martha was so complete, so thorough, that it protected her even after he was gone. He anticipated her need, prepared for it, and left her not just money, but also guidance, comfort, and 15 years' worth of letters to remind her she was loved. For anyone facing loss, financial struggles, or difficult transitions, remember Martha. Remember that sometimes the answer to our prayers is already there, waiting to be discovered. Sometimes the people who love us have been preparing for our future in ways we can't see. Martha thought she'd lost everything, but what she'd really lost was just the weight of not knowing. Once she found Henry's gift, once she understood the depth of his planning and love, she didn't just survive, she transformed her life into something beautiful. And that's what love does. Real love. The kind that works in secret for decades. The kind that plans for futures it might not see. The kind that reaches across the barrier of death to say, I'm still taking care of you. Thank you for joining us for Martha's incredible journey. Share this story with someone who needs to remember that love is the most powerful force in the world, and that miracles often come disguised as rusty old sheds. We'll see you in the next story.